Hello students and welcome to chapter number 5. In this chapter we will introduce new concepts on management and how decision makers within organizations such as managers and business leaders must always think about who is affected and who is impacted by the decisions that they make. So it's not only the employees, it's not only the suppliers and the customers, but their thinking should go beyond this to include society, to include concepts like sustainability, and the decisions that they make must always be ethical. So this is why we will talk about ethics and the different types of ethical decision making and how can we promote ethical decision making and ethical leadership within organizations. To begin with, here are some different points of views about responsibility towards society. So here are some different opinions, some different schools of thought when it comes to what is our responsibility as an organization or as managers to society or to the environment, for example. So the first variety of this in this continuum is called social obligation. So what is social obligation? Obligation is something like a duty, something that you must do. When you are obligated to do something, someone is forcing you to do it. So it is the obligation of a business to meet its economic and legal responsibilities and nothing more. So this is one idea about business, which says that you do not have any responsibility except to maximize or meet your business goals and work within the law. So you only have to meet your economic business goals, make profits, make money, generate more revenue, and also work within the legal framework, work within the law. Do not break the law. Meet your legal requirements. That's it. You do not have to contribute to society. You do not have to contribute to the well-being of your employees. Nothing. This is your only responsibility. This is your only obligation. So that is one idea. The second idea is the classical view, which is that management's only social responsibility is to maximize profits. So some business owners, some big managers would say, by contributing, by increasing profits, I'm increasing the income of my employees, and therefore I am already contributing to society because my employees are already members of society. So I am only to be responsible for maximizing profits. And by maximizing profits, I'm contributing to the well-being of society by increasing income. So they do not consider the environment, for example. They do not consider social development. Their only job is just to maximize profits, make more money. So that is the second idea, the second opinion, the second point of view. The third one is the socio-economic view. As always with these words, compound words, these are a combination of two words, so societal and economic. So this is the view that management's social responsibility is beyond this. This is more than making profits. It's about protecting and preserving the interests of society. So we are not just to maximize profits, we are not just to work within the law, we should go beyond this, do something more by making sure that we are not harming this community that we work within. هذه الشركة تشتغل في مدينة الجبيل وعملياتها ومصانعها في مدينة الجبيل. فوظيفتها ومهمتها not just to make money, but to ensure that they are helping the residents of the city. يساهمون في تعزيز حياة المقيمين في هذه المدينة، لأنه هذول الناس اللي يقيمون في هذه المدينة يتأثرون من هذه الشركة، يتأثرون بعمليات هذه الشركة. So they must be considered when it comes to decision making. And the company and the business, when they have this view, this conceptualization, socioeconomic one, They consider the society and not just profits. And then finally, we have social responsiveness. So responsiveness comes from response. So they respond to some popular social needs. So something that has happened already in society, and the company and this business or this organization, they are responding and reacting and interacting with it. One good example about this is when the motor company, the car company, Ford, when they were the first to spend a lot of money on increasing awareness about texting while driving. شركة فورد كانت من أوائل الشركات اللي تسوي حملات توعوية، وصرفت مبالغ وميزانيات كبيرة عشان توعي الناس أكثر إنه ما يصير تستخدم الجوال وقت سواقة السيارة. Because this is harmful, it causes accidents, many people have died because of this. Not only that, so they have responded to a social need. شافوا انه في احتياج، شافوا انه في مشكله في المجتمع، الناس قاعده تموت وتسوي حوادث بسبب انها تستعمل الجوال وقت السواقه. ف how have they responded? By endorsing such awareness campaigns. Not only that, but Ford was among the, if not, they were pioneers actually when it comes to incorporating such technologies like speech recognition or the hands-free uh, uh, hands-free gadgets in order to enable drivers to make phone calls or do some texting without being distracted, so only by using your voice. من الشغلات الجميلة اللي سوتها شركة فورد to respond to the situation is that uh, كانوا من اوائل الشركات اللي دخلت التقنيات اللي تخلي البلوتوث وكذا، تخلي سائق السياره ممكن يستعمل الجوال من غير ما يتشتت، من غير ما يسوي اي حوادث. So this is called social responsiveness, and this is when a company responds to something that is already happening in society. And now we reach the level of social responsibility. So in the previous two slides, we have gone from only obligation to the law and to increase our profits. Then we went through different degrees and steps of being socially responsible until now we reach this level called social responsibility. So in here, it's not only about money, it's not only about just contributing to society. This is about doing what's good for society. This is about doing the right thing. This is more than just a legal obligation. This is more than just maximizing profits and increasing revenues for our shareholders. So this goes back to our intentions. So when we make a decision to invest, when we make a decision to open a new branch, when we make a decision to launch a new product, for example, we always think of society. And we, as a business, it's not like we are doing something more. This is part of who we are. This is in the core of our values. So whenever a decision is being made, we consider society first. How is this going to help society? Is this good or bad? Is this going to help with the development of this society? Is this going to harm society in any way? So from the word itself, from the term itself, responsibility, مسؤولية الاجتماعية، تسمعوها كثير في تويتر وفي الشركات تسوي حاجة اسمها المسؤولية الاجتماعية. So they sponsor such societal events. ليش شركة سبكن هي الراعي الرسمي مثلا لجمعية تحفيظ القرآن الكريم؟ ليش شركة صدارة ترعى حفل اليوم الوطني هنا في الجبيل كل سنة؟ وهكذا. ليش شركة أرامكو تعطي دعم للمزارعين في منطقة جازان عشان يزرعون بن؟ This is social responsibility. They consider this is part of who they are. We are not here just to make money. ما نبغى بس احنا نزيد أسعار الأسهم حقتنا في السوق ونطلع أرباح زيادة. احنا نساهم في بناء وتنمية وتكوين وتطوير هذا المجتمع. هذا المكان اللي احنا قاعدين نستفيد منه. احنا نشتغل على ارض الجبال، احنا نشتغل على ارض المملكة، على ارض الوطن. So we must give back. We must give back. This is social responsibility. And whenever a decision is being made, they always think from that perspective. Nowadays, because people and societies and countries are becoming more socially conscious, they are becoming more concerned with the environment, there is now a way for individual investors and for entities and anyone who wants to invest in any organization to do some sort of screening. It's basically an examination to identify those companies and those organizations that are socially conscious. So when you have an amount of money to invest and you have different types of companies to invest in, you can choose to invest in company A versus company B because company A is more socially conscious. What that means is that they have better product safety, they care about their employees, they do not harm the environment, etc. Some individual investors, some even investors as representatives of countries, they wouldn't invest in organizations that have poor employee relations, for example, or in organizations that produce harmful products like cigarettes, tobacco, firearms, etc. So what social screening is all about is applying social criteria to investment decisions. So before you make an investment decision, you don't only look at return on investment and all these financial ratios, but you also incorporate a factor in which you try to examine how socially conscious this organization is. Just as the case when it comes to any type of management theory, any type of management concept, you always have people who are for and against this type of theory. So when it comes to also social responsibility, this is not an exception. So we have a lot of people who are supporting the concept of social responsibility, and their argument is that it's all about the expectation of the public. This is what people want. Now, whether we agree with it or not, but this is what our customers want. This is what our societies want. So we cannot go beyond our environments. We are constrained and limited by the preferences of our investors, of our stakeholders, etc. And sometimes people say that this is the right thing to do. This is an ethical obligation. This makes the environment better. So we have a lot of supporting arguments for social responsibility, but also we have a strong justification for people who are against social responsibility. They say that this is against business. When we are in the field of business, when we are in the in the game of business, we want to make profit. That's it. When we are doing such things like investing a lot of money into environmentally friendly products, we are denying our stockholders, the people who own stock in our company, we are denying them of their own profits, and this imposes a lot of cost on the company. And this is basically making us divert from our purpose as an organization or as a business. We are here, we went into this industry because we wanted to make money, and now we are doing something that is not in line with our objectives. So what I would advise you to do is that either pause the video and read these arguments thoroughly, or of course you can refer to the textbook. But what you need to realize is that we always have people who support and people who do not support any type of concept. What you as a decision maker must do is decide which side are you on, and always try to strike a balance. You don't want to be, of course, you don't want to harm the environment, but at the same time, you don't want to cost your organization a lot of money and you end up making no profits. So it's always about striking a good balance. Okay, moving on from social responsibility to a concept that is still within the same mentality and this is green management. You have probably heard this term a number of times already in movies and in magazines and stuff. People are going green, or a business or a shop or something is going green. What do we mean by going green? So this color green comes from the trees. It refers to the color of tree leaves. أوراق الشجر لونها أخضر. So green management and going green and things like green energy, this is all about the environment, the natural environment. So green management is when managers consider the impact of their organization and their decisions not only on society but on the natural environment. كيف العمليات حقتنا ومنتجاتنا والطريقة اللي احنا ندير فيها شركتنا كيف حتأثر على البيئة الطبيعية، الأشجار والأنهار والجو وغيره. Okay? So when businesses and organizations are going green, it means that they are considering the environment and they are trying to preserve it. So there are different degrees and approaches to being or to going green or to green management. في درجات من الالتزام بسياسة going green هذه. So the first one is called light green. أخضر فاتح شوية. So we are going green, but we are not really going all in, but we still consider the environment. So this is called the light green approach or the legal approach. From the name itself, legal, it means we are just obeying the laws that consider the environment. So it's all about, for us, as long as we are not breaking any environmental laws, then we are good. Then we are doing our part when it comes to preserving trees and the natural environment. يقول لك احد شركات البتروكيماويات اللي هنا في الجبيل مثلا انه احنا ايش قوانين الهيئه بالنسبه للانبعاثات السامه للغازات المصانع، راح نلتزم فيها، ما راح نسوي اكثر من كذا. احنا اوريدي سوينا دورنا، خلاص التزمنا بالقوانين البيئيه. So this is the light green approach. More than that is the market approach. This is when firms respond to the market, when firms respond to the needs of their customers for environmentally friendly products. Why would a shop or a supermarket like Panda, for example, why would they get plastic bags now that can be recycled? So, and why would other shops and supermarkets would choose to provide shopping bags that are not only not made of plastic at all but made of recyclable material? شوف بعض البقالات مثلا الآن زي بندا، يمكن زي التميمي، صاروا الأكياس البلاستيكية اللي يجيبوها تلاحظوا صار مكتوب عليها قابلة للتحلل أو قابلة لإعادة التدوير، على عكس أنواع البلاستيك القديمة. لأنه الآن صاروا يعرفون أنه كثير من الزبائن، كثير من أفراد المجتمع صاروا يفضلون أنهم هم يتسوقون من محلات تساهم في الحفاظ على البيئة. they are just responding to the preferences of their customers. So even though their intention might not be to preserve the environment, but this is still good. ممكن تكون مش هذه نيتهم من الأساس، هم مش مهتمين أصلا بالبيئة، لكن إذا إحنا ما اهتمينا بالبيئة وما عرضنا منتجات زي هذه وسوينا مبادرات زي هذه حنخسر زباين كثير. يعني الزبون حيقول لك أنا ما عاد بتسوق في بندا انيمور، أنا بروح التميمي، لأنه التميمي عندهم أكياس قابلة للتحلل وبندا لا، معناته بندا قاعد يضر البيئة. even though نواياهم ما كانت إنه الحفاظ على البيئة، لكن this is still something that is good. It is responding to a good cause, and they are basically responding to changes in the market. So that's another degree or another approach in green management. A third degree or a third approach is called the stakeholder approach. We have seen this term before in the previous chapter, stakeholder. So who is a stakeholder? A stakeholder is anyone who has an interest in the organization, anyone who affects the organization or is affected by it. So in the stakeholder approach, firms work to meet the environmental demands of multiple stakeholders. So whenever we make a decision, we must consider the effect of that decision on all of our stakeholders. So suppliers, the community, everyone. يعني الآن قررت شركة سابك إنها تسوي مصنع جديد. قبل لا تفتح المصنع, if they are following this stakeholder approach, يفكرون كيف راح يأثر هذا المصنع اللي يطلع غازات سامة على المجتمع المحلي في الجبيل, كيف راح يأثر على الأطفال, موظفين اللي حيشغلون المصنع هذا اللي يتعرضون مباشرة للمواد السامة والخطيرة هذه, كيف راح يتأثرون, and what can we do to protect them. So that's the stakeholder approach. And then finally, the activist approach. So this is when a firm or a business, so a firm means an organization. This is when a firm or an organization goes beyond this. They look for ways to respect and preserve the environment and be socially responsible, act in an active way. So it's not only about meeting the regulations. ما هو بس إنه طالما ما كسرنا أي قوانين so we are fine. It's not only about considering stakeholders. It's about being proactive. Proactive. It's called the activist approach. So you are actively pursuing these issues. أنت قاعد تبادر. ما هو بس you are just responding to the needs of the market, but you are taking the initiative. أنت قاعد تبادر إنك أنت تسوي برامج وتتخذ خطوات وقرارات تساهم في الحفاظ على الانفايرمنت. لما بيل جيتس مثلا صاحب شركة مايكروسوفت أحد أغنى رجال العالم يتبرع مثلا بنصف ثروته عشان يحارب أحد الأمراض في بعض المجتمعات الفقيرة. This is being, this is following the activist approach. Okay, so green management and going green. You have different approaches from light green to, we call it dark green, or the activist approach. It's more about the commitment and how willing you are to go the extra mile when it comes to preserving the natural environment. And now, after discussing all of the different green approaches, this is a nice visual that summarizes all of those different types of green approaches, and it categorizes them from low to high in terms of their environmental sensitivity. So remember when we talked about legal approach, or what is called light green, this is kind of like the minimum requirement that organizations do to comply with environmental laws. And then as you go up, you become more sensitive as an organization towards the environment, and you take a more activist approach. So instead of just simply simply abiding by the regulations and the laws that you that you are bound by, you are taking an extra step to be more environmentally conscious. So you need to realize, where do you exist in terms of your environmental sensitivity? Are you within the lower portion, or are you within the more higher, more darker green approach kind of practice that you adopt? So one might ask, so how can I evaluate? How would I know, whether or not my actions towards green management are actually paying off? Am I doing the right thing? Am I actually helping the environment or not? So how can you monitor and control such activities and actions? There are a lot of ways. One of them, of course, is the company issued reports. So typically speaking, companies issue regular reports, weekly, monthly, quarterly reports, annual reports, etc. So within those reports, you can include a part that basically analyzes your impact and your performance when it comes to being environmentally friendly. We have also a lot of external organizations like the ISO, where they have developed regulations and standards so that you can compare your practices against and see how much compliance you have. And then of course we have a lot of reports that are issued by different types of regulatory organizations from around the world. So you would hear these types of things often, like the top 100 environment friendly companies around the world. So you can compare yourself against some of those companies and aspire to become, part of that list, and so that you can be amongst the pioneers of those who are most conscious about the environment when it comes to business practices. So the gist here is that you need to have some sort of mechanism, some sort of way, so that you can evaluate your progress, so that you can evaluate your commitment towards management actions when it comes to green management. And now it is time for the second part of the chapter, and that is ethics. So the title of this chapter was Social Responsibility and Ethics. So we have finished now discussing social responsibility. Let us dig deeper into the concept of ethics. What are they? These are principles, values, beliefs that define right and wrong behavior. So when ethics are those convictions, those principles, values, things that you believe in. And for you, these are the things that determine right from wrong. Al-akhlaqiyat. Okay? So many decisions which managers make require them to consider both the process and who is affected by the result. So as a manager, when you are making a decision, it's not only about the means, it's also about the ends. ما هو الغاية تبرر الوسيلة. الغايات مهمة والوسائل كذلك مهمة. So the process is important, but also the people who are going to be affected by this process are even equally as important. So ethics are the things that you believe in. For you, these are the things that determine right from wrong. Now that we have a little understanding at least of what ethics is all about, so what type of factors determine whether or not a person is going to behave ethically or unethically? What are the different influencers? What led a person to be that way, to be ethical or non-ethical? We have a lot of different factors, of course. We have, moral development. We need to have an understanding of how did you develop your morals? Where did you get them from? We have, of course, individual characteristics. People are different from one person to another. We have the intensity of issues. So how big or small or how intense an issue is. And then we have the culture of the organization. Of course, whether or not an employee is going to behave ethically or not depends on the culture of the organization in which he or she operates. And then we have structural variables, which is something that we will discuss in a future slide. So the different types of variables that have to do with the structure and how what are the different roles that they play when it comes to influencing ethical or unethical behavior. So all of those types of moderators, all of those types of factors definitely influence and lead to a conclusion that this person behaves ethically or not ethically because of such background. So there's a connection, of course, between ethics and morality. So ethics are your morals. So the rules and the principles that you live by. So how does a person develop morals? We start with, something called the pre-conventional level. And the pre-conventional level begins with, outside factors. So how you behave in terms of ethics, your commitment towards ethics is based on outside factors like punishment or things like exchange of rewards based on what you will get in return. Then you move on to the next level, and as you move on to different levels, these become more internalized. So the conventional level now is about the expectations of others. So you are not being punished by behaving unethically, but you will feel internally that you are disappointing others by behaving in such a way. So conventional level is all about the expectations of others, for example. And then you have the principled level. So this is entirely internal, and it's all about how you view yourself, and you behave in an ethical way because you feel that you belong to a certain group, and this certain group adopts a certain type of philosophy and adopts certain values. So because I am a Muslim, I behave in that way. Because I support, because I belong to this type of group, I behave in that way. So it's more internal now instead of external. So we have different levels of um, ethics, and how you have become you have come to this stage where you commit to these ethics. So we start with, at the bottom, something called the pre-conventional level. So where did these ethics come from, and like to which degree do you commit to these ethics? So the pre-conventional level at the very bottom over here, this is about consequences. This is about results of this action. تخيل معي طفل صغير، طفل صغير تقول له يا حبيبي يا بابا، إذا ما سويت دروسك راح أحرمك من الحلاوة. So there's a negative result. So this child will only do the right thing, that is studying, only to avoid punishment or only to get a reward. So that's a pre-conventional level. لما الموظف تقول له تراك إذا تأخرت عن الدوام، أو تراك إذا اختلست من أموال الشركة، أو تراك إذا استعملت أموال الشركة أو أدوات الشركة لمصلحة شخصية، تراك راح تتعاقب وتفصل من عملك وحيحصل لك كذا وكذا. وهم صاروا يلتزمون بهذه الأمور فقط لأنهم خايفين من العقاب، أو فقط لأنهم إذا التزمنا بالشيء هذا راح نحصل على مكافأة بسرعة. So that's called the pre-conventional level, or stage of moral development. What is moral development? So morals are those values and beliefs that we talked about. Then you have the conventional level. The conventional level. So this is about basically fulfilling your obligations, living up to the expectations of others. So it's not just about punishment. So even if there is no punishment, but people will be disappointed in you, you would still commit to that level of ethics. So إذا قال لك نرجع للمثال حق الطفل الصغير، يا ابني يا حبيبي حتى أنا ما راح أعاقبك، وما راح أحرمك من الحلاوة، وما راح أضربك، وما راح أسوي لك أي حاجة، لكني أنا راح أزعل منك كثير and I will be disappointed. So that's the conventional level. Or when you make a promise to someone, and just because you don't want to break your word, you commit to that promise. So that's the conventional level. وأخيرا the highest, that's the principled level. لاحظوا في ال two levels اللي تكلمنا عنهم قبل شوية، it was all about others. So in the pre-conventional levels, pre-conventional stage, you would receive some punishment or rewards from others. In the conventional stage, you were afraid to disappoint others. But in the principled level, we do not care about what others think or what others might do. I would still do the right thing, no matter what. تخيلوا معايا شخص مدير توظيف، اثنين تقدموا عنده لنفس الوظيفة، أحدهم شقيقه أخوه، وشخص ثاني أكفأ من أخوه بشوية. الآن عنده معضلة، عنده مشكلة، أوظف أخوي ولا أوظف الشخص الثاني؟ طيب إذا وظفت الشخص الثاني، مع أنه هو فعلا أكفأ من أخوي، لكني أنا راح أقع في حرج كبير مع أخوي، مع أبوي، مع المجتمع، مع الناس. وإذا وظفت أخوي يمكن أكون أنا ظلمت الشخص الثاني لأنه هو فعلا أكفأ منه. So that this situation is called an ethical dilemma. المعضلة الأخلاقية. An ethical dilemma. So an ethical dilemma is when you are faced with a situation where the two options are difficult and none of the options is very straightforward. So you would still face some difficulty making that decision. So the principled level is not about others. This is about upholding your beliefs. regardless of what others think, regardless if you get, even if you receive some criticism. Okay, so three levels of, or three stages of moral development. So how did you come this ethical? Where did you get these ethics from? Pre-conventional stage, the conventional stage, and finally the principled stage. And now this is kind of a major point in this chapter, the factors that determine ethical and unethical behavior. So what influences ethics? What influences you when it comes to making ethical decisions? So the first one is, of course, individual characteristics. People are different. This is what we have been emphasizing since the beginning of the semester. This is why the field of management is different from other disciplines and fields, because it's based on people, it's based on individuals, it's based on human beings, and human beings are different. You will never find two people who have the same values. For example, القيم والمبادئ اللي عند خالد غير اللي عند عبد الرحمن غير اللي عند عبد الله. So individual differences exist. What are values? We talked about values when we talked about ethics. These are basic convictions about what is right and wrong. قناعاتك, مبادئك, قيمك, things that you believe in. أنت إيش تعتقد الأشياء الخطأ وإيش تعتقد الأشياء الصح. So that's the first thing in individual characteristics. The second thing is ego strength. What is ego strength? A personality measure of the strength of a person's conviction. So how strong are your beliefs? How strong is your commitment to your values? So you have convictions, you have values, you have principles. So how strongly do you commit to them? How strongly do you believe in them? And then something that is called locus of control. So in future courses, inshallah, you will take personality, and you will study personality in such courses like organizational behavior, human resources management, and so on. So locus of control is a personality dimension, and it's a self-evaluation of personality, meaning, so this is how you look to yourself. How do you consider yourself when it comes to how much do you think you can influence outcomes, and how much do you think you can control things around you. Okay, إلى أي مدى عندك ثقة في نفسك وقناعة إنه أنا أقدر أغير اللي حولي، أقدر أغير الظروف اللي حولي، أقدر أغير المصير اللي ممكن يصير. Okay, locus of control. So these are all part of individual characteristics. People are different when it comes to ethical or unethical behavior because of their personality, because of the way they were raised, because of their different values, to their levels of strength to those values, and how they believe, how much they believe in themselves that they can actually change things around them. So that's the first factor, individual characteristics. Another aspect, another factor that influences ethical behavior is referred to here as structural variables. So within an organization itself, the structures that are followed, the structures that are adopted by the organization in terms of things like its structural design, how authority is distributed, how certain rules are being influenced, and also how goals are being formatted and how goals are being attained. All of those types of factors influence whether or not employees are going to behave ethically or not. There are certain structures that encourage employees to behave ethically. There are certain structures that reduce ambiguity, that reduce uncertainty, and therefore it pushes employees to be more disposition to behave ethically. Even though, all types of organizations, they set goals for their employees with the intention of getting them more motivated to achieve work objectives, but, poorly designing goals can lead to employees behaving unethically because you unintentionally unintentionally lead them to behaving unethically because they would do whatever they need to obtain and attain these goals. Also, performance appraisal systems. So the way you evaluate the performance of your employees, we have something called, annual appraisals, for example, how each and every year an employee is being evaluated, and based on that evaluation, they would receive bonuses, benefits, promotions, salary increments, etc. So sometimes the criteria against which employees are being evaluated and appraised, they can push employees towards behaving unethically because it leads them to, falsifying information or, presenting misleading facts to their supervisors. And finally, how rewards are allocated, how rewards are distributed. Sometimes people would engage in unhealthy competition and they would resort to deviance in order to present and show themselves as people who are productive, as people who are hard workers, in order to receive a certain reward or a certain benefit. So the bottom line here is that one of the factors that influence ethical or unethical behavior is the structures themselves. So things like how employees are rewarded, how employees are appraised, and how goals are structured. And now with factor number 3, and that is the intensity of the issue. So the first factor was about the people involved, the individuals. الأشخاص نفسهم، في أشخاص أخلاقيين، أشخاص غير أخلاقيين بسبب قيمهم، بسبب تربيتهم، بسبب أشياء كثيرة. بعدين تكلمنا على الشركة نفسها, the culture of the organization. But now it's about the issue itself. Now it's about the situation. عشان كده دائما in management we say it depends, it depends, and depends. It depends on what? It depends on the people, it depends on the situation, it depends on so many other things. So here it's about the situation, it's about the matter, it's about the issue. So how intense is the issue? أحيانا إيش اللي يخلي الشخص يتصرف بطريقة أخلاقية أو غير أخلاقية؟ كان العنصر الأول اللي هو الشخص نفسه، مبادئه وأخلاقه. العنصر الثاني ثقافة الشركة. العنصر الثالث هنا الموضوع نفسه اللي ممكن أتصرف فيه بشكل أخلاقي أو لا. طيب الموضوع ممكن يكون مهم جدا، ممكن يكون مش مرة مهم. إيش اللي يحدد لي أهمية الموضوع؟ We have 6 characteristics. The first one is called greatness of harm. So how big is this issue? How many people are going to be harmed by this issue? يعني مثلا إذا جيت أنا وقررت إني أنا أحرم بعض الموظفين من بدل معين، يعني نوع من مصروف كذا ينزل لهم شهريا، ولما جيت أشيك في سجلات الشركة وجدت أنه فقط موظفين أو 3 هم اللي راح ينحرمون من البدل. طيب هذا وضع. This is one situation, one scenario. Another situation is that لما أجي وأشوف أنه البدل هذا راح يحرم منه حوالي 75% من موظفين الشركة. ومين هم ال 75% من موظفين الشركة؟ هذولا السكرتارية مثلا، الناس اللي أصلا رواتبهم ضعيفة، فأنا راح أزود ضعف رواتبهم بإني راح أحرمهم من مبلغ شهري ينزل لهم. So this is called greatness of harm. How many people are going to be impacted by this decision? How many people are going to be harmed? So in this case, based on this, some people will decide, are they going to behave ethically or unethically? Second one is called consensus of wrong. Consensus, so agreement. How many other people agree with you that this is right or wrong? كم شخص آخر يشاركك نفس رأيك؟ اوكي؟ تيجي احيانا تتخذ قرار انت تعتقد انه هو القرار الصحيح وانه هذا قرار اخلاقي جدا، تحصل معارض لك 1 ولا 2 فقط. على عكس وضع اخر لما تحصل ناس كثيرة جدا متفقة انه هذا الوضع خاطئ وغير اخلاقي ولا بد انه يتغير. So this is called consensus of wrong. The third one is the probability of harm. So the likelihood of people getting getting hurt, the likelihood of people being harmed. So احتمالية إنه أحد يتأذى، احتمالية إنه أحد ينضر، احتمالية إنه أحد يصير له شيء. والله إذا أنا اتخذت هذا القرار وفي احتمالية فقط 10% إنه ممكن يحصل ضرر. So people would or might be more inclined to behave unethically. لكن إذا والله أنا حسبتها وجدت إنه والله احتمالية إنه أشخاص تتضرر بشكل كبير توصل فوق 70%. So now maybe I would go back. Number 4 is the immediacy of consequences. The immediacy, so it comes from immediate. Immediate means فوري, الآن, عاجل. It will happen right away. Consequences are results. So how quick are the results and the impacts. ممكن أتخذ قرار الآن بس ما راح يبين أثره ونتيجته إلا بعد سنة. وفي قرارات لا نتائجها فورية والضرر اللي يحصل منها على طول. Okay, so that's one part of the issue. Number 5 is proximity to victims. So proximity means how close you are. And this word victim, ضحايا, ليش قاعدين, why are we using this word victims? Because these are the people who are getting harmed. هذول الأشخاص اللي يتضررون عشان كده سميناهم ضحايا, victims. So how close are the victims to you? Are they personal friends? Are they family members? لاحظ لما أحد يجي يبغى مثلا يضر شخص آخر، إذا كان يقرب له أو إذا كان صديقه الخاص يعني ممكن يتراجع، لكن شخص غريب عنك ما تعرفه you will be more inclined to do something bad to them. And finally, concentration of effect. So how bad, how negative, how harmful is it? The concentration of the bad effect. So what were these? These were the 6 characteristics of the intensity of the issue. We were still talking about factors that determine ethical or unethical behavior. So let's take a step back. When would you behave either ethically or unethically? We have seen 2 factors. Factor number 3 here is the issue itself. So we analyze the situation. We analyze the problem at hand. We analyze the issue itself according to 6 different characteristics or factors. ننظر للمسألة نفسها اللي احنا نبغى نتصرف فيها. Okay, ونحللها. We analyze it. And based on that, sometimes people would behave ethically بطريقة أخلاقية or unethically بطريقة غير أخلاقية. Building on the previous slide, we have reviewed and discussed the 6 factors of issue intensity. All of those factors of issue intensity suggest that the more you have of a certain factor, the greater the issue or the greater the importance of the issue. So, for example, the larger the number of people being harmed, the more agreement that the action is wrong, the greater the likelihood that the action will cause harm, etc. The more of a certain factor that exists, the greater the issue intensity. It means that the issue is more important in terms of ethics. It means that the issue is actually very highly significant. So the thing that you need to focus on over here is you need to examine an issue in terms of a number of different factors, and based on this analysis, based on this examination, you can determine how big and how intense the issue is and how serious you need to be when it comes to addressing it. So ethics in an international context. We have used the word globalization so many times, and you will face it in almost all your courses. Why do we always consider the international environment and the international context? Because we are in the era and the age of globalization. Nowadays, organizations have operations everywhere around the world. شركات سابك عندها مصانع في سنغافورة، في أستراليا، في أفريقيا، وفي أمريكا، وفي أماكن كثيرة جدا. So, what is considered ethical here in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is not necessarily considered ethical elsewhere. عشان كذا كنا دائما نقول you have to consider the culture, you have to consider the culture, you have to consider the culture. So you must make sure that social and cultural differences are being considered. حاجة وممارسة تعتبر عادية جدا ومقبولة جدا هنا عندنا في المملكة، ممكن تعتبر شيء ما هو مجرد غير أخلاقي ولكن حتى غير قانوني في بعض الدول. أحد الأمثلة مثلا طبيعي جدا لما وفد يزور شركة أخرى إن إحنا نستقبله ونسوي لهم غدا ونعطيهم هدايا ونسكنهم حتى على حسابنا. في بعض الأماكن في أمريكا مثلا هذا يعتبر شيء غير أخلاقي على الإطلاق، لأنه يقول لك هذا معناته أنه أنتم في بينكم حاجة ما تبون تعرف، في مصالح. إيش اللي شركة تعطي شركة أخرى هدايا؟ ما لها علاقة. أنتم جايين تتناقشون في موضوع، تجتمعون تناقشون شيء ثاني، المفروض ما حد يحصل على أي حاجة من أحد ثاني، ولا هدايا ولا مبالغ ولا أي حاجة. So this is what we are talking about over here, the international context. Okay, so because of this, for that purpose, some organizations have tried to develop some sort of standards and practices for their global operations. شركة تجي زي شركة سابق تحاول إنه هي تطلع زي guidelines of ethical behaviors, and these guidelines will be adhered to in all of the branches and factories of the company all around the world. Not only that, but other global associations like the United Nations, منظمة العمل الدولية التابعة لمنظمة الأمم المتحدة، تطلع مثلا بعض النصائح، بعض المعايير اللي تحدد ethical or unethical behaviors. Okay, so behaving ethically in an international context is something of great importance, and managers, decision makers, organizations must pay attention to. مثال آخر before we leave the slide، طبيعي ومقبول جدا 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 عندنا هنا في المملكة إنه أنت تشوف إعلان وظيفي يقول لك مطلوب رجال فقط، أو مطلوب أشخاص لا تزيد أعمارهم عن 30 سنة. في أمريكا مثلا لو نزلت إعلان زي هذا ممكن تدخل السجن، يقول لك أنت عنصري. Okay, because they consider this unethical, they consider this even illegal. This is discrimination. So this is why you have to pay attention to culture. Many countries around the world have joined something called the United Nations Global Compact. So the United Nations group has come up with an agreement in which there are 10 principles. So these 10 principles are classified into different categories. So we have human rights, we have labor standards, and we have others. So within each and every category we have principles. So things like you need to be aware that you are not abusing the rights of your workers, and when it comes to labor standards, for example, that you should not hire children. Children labor is absolutely prohibited. As long as you are a member of the United Nations group, you need to live by these 10 principles. So it's a kind of a way so that countries and organizations all around the world, especially a global company that has operations in different locations around the world, they need to adhere to these types of principles. What I would advise you to do is maybe pause the video to read through them more thoroughly, or of course you can refer to this exhibit in the textbook. And the figure continues to the further categories like the environment and also anti-corruption. So there's a separate and dedicated category in the United Nations Global Compact which is solely paying attention to the environment, that you need to undertake initiatives, for example, to promote greater environmental responsibility. So as long as you are a global company, as long as you are a company that operates in a country that is part of the United Nations Global Compact, you need to adhere to these types of principles. You need to be more aware, more responsive, more sustainable, etc. So it's one way to encourage companies and to help organizations be more sustainable and be more socially conscious. Now, there's something called values-based management, and the reason this concept is being introduced under employee selection in particular is because when you are in the process of selecting employees, of hiring, people, of interviewing potential candidates for a job opening in your organization, this would be a great time to examine their values, to see whether or not their own values are in line, are parallel with the values of your organization. Each and every organization, as you have probably learned already, or as you will see in this course or in future courses, at the very beginning, they have to determine their mission, their vision, their values, their principles, their goals, etc. So when we are hiring people, something that we need to focus on, in addition, of course, to their qualifications and potential, etc., is the values that they have. Do they share the same values as our organization or not? Because as we will see later in the chapter, when we have a strong culture, people are driven by values, and they feel that they belong to something more than just work from 7 o'clock to 4 o'clock. They feel that they really connect, they really are part of this greater entity, and they feel that we share the same values, we share the same principles, we have the same kinds of points of views about big issues like the economy, inequality between genders, etc. So values-based management is when the organization's values guide employees in how they do their own jobs. So the way you carry out your job duties is influenced greatly by the values of the organization, because the organization is honest with you, because the organization values things like transparency and equality and justice. You are following the same kinds of principles when you are doing and carrying out your own job. Inshallah, one of the first things that you will do when you are hired as a new employee, or even when you join an organization as a co-op student, as a trainee, they would ask you to sign, in addition to the employment contract, they would ask you to sign something called a code of ethics. ميثاق المهنة وميثاق الشرف إلى آخره. So the code of ethics is basically a formal statement of an organization's primary values and the ethical rules you are expected to follow. So the employment contract would specify things like working hours, would specify things like your salary, your benefits, your, what you are entitled to as an employee of this organization. But the code of ethics is going to indicate and specify how you are expected to carry out your job duties. So what type of principles and ethics and values you are supposed to uphold. So you would see things like this, that you are supposed to be honest, you are expected to be friendly with and be respectful towards your colleagues and towards our customers. You are expected to be honest and not steal from the company, etc. So a code of ethics is something of great importance to all organizations, and it needs to be clearly communicated to employees from the very beginning so that they are aware of how they are expected to behave, how they are expected to deliver their job outcomes, so that everyone is on the same page. So here is an example of a code of ethics. Again, in this example, we have classifications, or as referred to here, clusters, so groups of codes of ethics. So the first label we have is being a dependable organizational citizen. So you are being considered a citizen of this organization. You are a member of this big family. You are a member of this group. And because of this, you have rights and you also have responsibilities. So what you are expected to do when you are a citizen of this organization, when you are a member of this family, when you are part of this entity, is, for example, you need to manage personal finances well, you need to comply with safety, you shouldn't use abusive language, etc. So this is one way, one example of how you are expected to behave when you are part of this bigger organization. Another category over here is, you are not supposed to do anything unlawful. So anything that is illegal, anything that is improper or could harm the organization, could cause it some harm, you shouldn't do it. You should avoid it. Stay away from it. So you would see things like bribes are prohibited. You're not supposed to take any money in order to, falsify information, for example. You should avoid outside activities that impair duties. You should maintain confidentiality. So if you are dealing with sensitive, secret information, you should keep them to yourself. You shouldn't disclose them to outsiders. So this is another group of or another category of a code of ethics. So these are examples of what you might see, or in case later on you become a manager or you work in the HR department, you would be asked maybe to formulate a code of ethics. So this is part, at least you have seen an example now and you know what it looks like. And finally, the last cluster or the last category is being good to customers. Of course, customers are the center of all organizational activities, because these are the ones from whom we generate our profits, our revenues. So you need to be good to them. You need to convey true claims in product advertisements. You need to ensure that you are being responsible towards them, that you are being responsive to their needs, etc. So a code of ethics is something that is highly regarded in the organization. It takes a lot of careful thought to come up with the exact wording of a code of ethics. It shouldn't be something that you just download off the internet. It should really communicate a clear message to your organization and to your different stakeholders, how you as an organization hold yourself responsible to your own ethics. Just because you have written a code of ethics and you are asking your employees in the organization to sign it, it doesn't mean that they are simply going to live by it and adhere to it all the time. There are other supporting things that you can do as a manager, as that you can recommend to the organization as an employee, so that you can strengthen commitment to the code of ethics. One of the first thing at the top of the list is basically you ask managers to become role models. They, actions speak louder than words. When employees see managers adhering to the code of ethics, when they see them behaving in an ethical manner, they are going to follow. They are going to be inspired to follow their lead. Managers should reaffirm the importance of the ethics code. So all the time, managers should communicate to employees that the code of ethics is something that is highly regarded, is something that is of great importance, and that you shouldn't break it, that you should always, abide by it. And also, stakeholders should be considered as an ethics code is developed or improved. So you should always think, always expand your thinking when it comes to all the decisions made in the organization to include the different stakeholders. Do not only focus on the internal parties. Do not only focus on employees or profits. Focus on the society. Focus on the environment. Focus on suppliers. Focus on the different aspects of governmental agencies, for example.
always includes stakeholders. And managers should communicate and reinforce the code of ethics regularly. So they should take some time during regular meetings. There should be some sort of, campaigns that remind employees constantly of the company's way, of the company's code of ethics, of how we as a company do business. And finally, managers should use something called the 5-step process to guide employees when faced with ethical dilemmas. So an ethical dilemma is basically a situation, is basically a problem in which it isn't clear cut, where right or wrong is. So whenever you are faced with such situation, there's a particular step that you can follow that would help you make the right decision. So employees should be encouraged by their leaders, by their managers and supervisors, what to do, should be advised on how to handle ethical dilemmas. When you do all of these kinds of things, you are creating an environment in which that is basically conducive of higher commitment to the company's ethics code. And here's the 5-step process for addressing ethical dilemmas. So what's a dilemma? It's a problem, it's a situation in which it isn't very much clear what is the right answer, because it's kind of complex, and a lot of people are being impacted by it. So what are the steps that you can follow whenever you are faced by an ethical dilemma? So a famous kind of ethical dilemma that is always brought up by philosophers is that would you punish a man who stole bread to feed his hungry family? So this is a very poor man, and he couldn't, provide for his family. So he went to a shop, and he stole one loaf of bread to feed his family. So is this right or wrong? So this is considered an ethical dilemma. So how can you go about, making a decision when it comes to being faced with such a situation? Step number 1, what is the ethical dilemma? What is the problem here? Like in the process of decision making, identify the dilemma, identify the problem. And then step number 2, you need to determine who is affected. Who are the affected stakeholders? In this case, we have the man, we have the family, we have society, etc. Which personal, organizational, or external factors are important in this decision? So what type of factors, what type of aspects should be considered when it comes to making this decision? So are we going to look at the organizational policy? Are we going to look at how is this decision going to look when it comes to being reported to the media? All of those kinds of things should be considered. And then step number 4 is what are the possible alternatives? So what are the different options that we have? We could punish him, we could let him go, we could give him a very light punishment. So all of those are your alternatives. You need to develop and work on those alternatives and see what are the available options that you have. And finally, step number 5 is what is my decision and how will I act on it? So finally, you should make a decision after having gone through all of those steps, and then how are you going to go about implementing it? How are you going to act on it? How are you going to communicate it? How are you going to frame it? How are you going to present it to the different stakeholders? So being faced with an ethical dilemma is not uncommon, unfortunately, in the workplace, but you can address it in a more systematic way so that you get closer to making a decision that is considered the least of two evils.
And of course, a major contributor to the fact whether or not employees within an organization are going to behave ethically or not are the leaders, the leadership in the organization. What they do is really important because we have said so many times before, they are the ones who set the tone. They are the ones who kind of develop and establish a culture of an organization. So they are the ones who uphold the shared values and set the cultural tone. It is them who are responsible for establishing a culture that is inclusive, a culture that is tolerant of all, or a culture that is discriminating, a culture that is unethical and unfair. هم الأشخاص اللي في يدهم السلطة، هم الأشخاص اللي يتخذون القرارات. They are the founders of the organization, the founders of policies and procedures. So if they were not behaving in an ethical way, of course others will not follow. They are role models in both what they say and what they do. هم قدوة. هتحصل شخص يقول لك إذا مديري يتأخر عن العمل كل يوم، إذا مديري ما يلتزم بإجراءات العمل، إذا مديري يسوي ويفعل كذا، كيف تبغاني أنا أصير أحسن؟ أوكي؟ خلي القيادة عندنا في الشركة تلتزم بالقيم والأخلاقيات اللي هم يدعون أنه الشركة تطبقها، بعدين تعال حاسبني. So of course how leaders behave and how leaders conduct themselves is an important factor in determining whether or not employees are going to be encouraged to behave ethically. What they do is far more important than what they say. So for us, actions of leaders are more important than what they say, even though both are definitely important, but actions mean more to us. لما أشوف أنا أنه رئيس الشركة يحرص على العمل، مع أنه شخص راتبه يمكن نص مليون في الشهر، مع ذلك كل يوم ما يتأخر، ويطلع يجي الشركة أول واحد، ويطلع من الشركة آخر واحد، ويشتغل في الويكندز، ويشتغل في أو خارج أوقات الدوام. لما أشوف شخص أنا يعني أحد القادة الكبار في الشركة وملتزم بالجد والاجتهاد والالتزام بعادات العمل والأخلاقيات المهنية, of course I would be more encouraged to follow, to copy and imitate their behavior. Of course now I'm going to be more inclined to behave in a way that appeals to those managers and in a way that copies their behavior. So leadership is an important factor in encouraging employees to behave ethically. So you want your employees to be ethical? You as a manager, you as a supervisor, you as a team leader, be ethical yourself. Another factor is the goals of the job and how employees' performance is evaluated. So performance appraisals mean performance evaluations. So why are we mentioning this? إيش دخل التقييم السنوي وتقييم أداء الموظفين في هل حيتصرفون بطريقة أخلاقية ولا لا؟ Let's consider this. Okay? So when you set and determine goals that are very difficult, not just challenging, but almost impossible to attain, and goals that are basically unrealistic, indirectly, you are encouraging your employees to behave unethically just to achieve those goals. لما أجي أقول لك مطلوب منك كموظف خدمة عملاء في البنك عندي إنه أنت تجيب لي كل شهر 1000 عميل، هذا هدف صعب جدا تحقيقه، صعب جدا جدا جدا. وتراك إذا ما جبت ال1000 عميل هذول راح نخصم من راتبك، يا تحقق الهدف يا استنى الخصم. So the goals that you set for your employees and how you evaluate their performance is something that you must pay attention to, so that maybe you are indirectly بطريقة غير مباشرة تدفعهم أنهم هم يتصرفوا بطريقة غير أخلاقية. So what has happened in one very famous incident in the US? بنك اسمه Wells Fargo. You can Google that story. Wells Fargo. سووا نفس المشكلة هذه، قالوا لموظفينهم جيبوا لنا عملاء، جيبوا لنا عملاء، جيبوا لنا عملاء، واللي ما يجيب عملاء راح ينفصل، اللي ما يجيب عملاء راح يتعرض لخصومات، اللي ما يجيب عملاء ما راح ياخذ بونص. صاروا ايش يسوون الموظفين؟ صاروا يفتحون حسابات وهمية، يفتحون حسابات وهمية. مجرد اني افتح كذا حساب، اطلع من راسي اسم شخص خالد عبد الله عبد الرحمن عبد الرزاق، واسوي له حساب واقول لهم ها شفتوا الحمد لله قدرت اجيب لكم كل العملاء واكثر بعد. والبنك قال اوه ما شاء الله عليك ممتاز تستاهل زياده. فصاروا كل الموظفين يسوون الطريقه هذه، الى ان اكتشفوا في النهايه وتعرض البنك لفضيحة وخسر وطاحت أسهم البنك بسبب أنهم هم كانوا ينقلون صورة غير صحيحة لملاك الأسهم ولسوق الأسهم، أنه إحنا قاعدين يجينا عملاء كثير جديد وإحنا لأنه إحنا كويسين. اكتشفوا أن هذا كله شغل وهمي. So the goals that they set for their employees and the way they evaluate the performance of their employees pushed those employees to behave in an unethical way. Okay, so you make sure that you set goals that are challenging, yes, but realistic at the same time. Okay, and make sure that it's the goals that you set are not only about money, that the goals that you set are not only about results, they should also consider the people, the effect of those decisions. So زي ما قلنا ما هو دائما الغاية تبرر الوسيلة. Means do not always justify ends. لازم you should consider the means as well as the ends. لازم تفكر في الغاية وتفكر في الوسيلة. Okay? ما هو عشان أوصل لهدفي أقوم أنا أسوي أي حاجة حتى لو كنت راح أؤذي ناس وأضر ناس وأتصرف بطريقة غير أخلاقية. أوكي؟ لا، ممكن إني أصل لهدفي أتأخر شوية ما أحققه بالكامل، أهم شيء إني أنا ما أضر ناس في الطريق. Okay? So job goals and performance appraisals, always consider how you evaluate your employees. And then we have a number of factors over here. So ethics training. Remember, what is the title of this part of the chapter? Encouraging ethical behavior. So how do we push our employees to behave ethically? We send them for training. كثير جهات عمل، كثير شركات ترسل موظفينها أو تقدم لهم كورسات داخل الشركة عن أخلاقيات المهنة. أنتم مثلا حتدرسون كورس كامل اسمه Professional Ethics، أخلاقيات المهنة في الإسلام. أوكي؟ عندنا جهة حكومية مسؤولة عن مكافحة الفساد اسمها نزاهة. نزاهة الآن قاعدة ترسل موظفينها إلى كثير جهات عمل سواء حكومية ولا خاصة، ولا ترسلهم حتى للجامعات وللمدارس يوعون الناس بالأخلاقيات ويفهمونهم إيش الممارسات في العمل اللي ممكن تسمى أخلاقية أو غير أخلاقية أو تصنف تحت باب الفساد. مثلا ما يصير انه انت تستعمل طابعة العمل انك عشان تطبع صورك الخاصة مثلا، هل هذا شيء له علاقة بالعمل؟ لا. فليش تصرف موارد الشركة في شيء له علاقة بالعمل؟ This is not ethical. Okay? So one way to encourage your employees to behave ethically is send them for training. Then independent social audits. In almost all organizations now, there's an entire separate dedicated department called internal audit، التدقيق الداخلي. ايش يسوون إدارة أو قسم التدقيق الداخلي هذا في الشركات وفي الجهات الحكومية وفي الجامعات وفي كل مكان؟ الآن we have policies, we have procedures, we have values, we have a mission, we have a vision as an organization. صح ولا لا؟ So what these people do is that they measure, they try to see, are you really doing your job when it comes to adhering and being committed to those values, to those procedures or not. انت عندك اجراءات عمل وتقول عشان يتوظف مثلا شخص عندي في الشركة هذه الاجراءات 1 2 3 4. اوكي؟ وخليت موظفينك قبل كذا تتذكرون لما قلنا يوقعون على الميثاق هذا الكود اوف كوندكت او كود اوف ethics. فالآن أنا جماعة التدقيق الداخلي, the people of internal audits, what we do is that we measure, do you actually commit to that or not? هل أنت فعلا تطبق الإجراءات واللوائح والأنظمة اللي أنت كتبتها كشركة ولا لا؟ هل أنت تلتزم بأخلاقيات المهنة اللي أنت فرضتها على موظفينك ولا لا؟ وهل الموظفين يلتزمون فيها أو لا؟ So these are called internal audits. And then finally we have protective mechanisms. Protective comes from protection, حماية, okay? What can we do to avoid problems? Creating mechanisms, ways of doing things. So we allow employees who face ethical dilemmas to do what is right without fear of reprimand. Reprimand meaning punishment. So we are a little bit tolerant when it comes to making mistakes. We have to give some sort of leeway, some sort of space for our employees to make mistakes. Otherwise, they would behave unethically. فين أحسن إنه الموظف ممكن يرتكب خطأ بسيط ممكن إصلاحه، ولا تهدده دائما إنه أي غلطة مهما كانت بسيطة راح تفصل وراح تعاقب وراح تتهزأ وراح يصير ويصير ويصير. الموظف لما دائما يسمع التهديدات هذه ما عاد يبغى يرتكب ولا غلطة مهما كانت بسيطة وإصلاحها بسيط، فبالتالي يقوم يكذب، يقوم يزور، يقوم يسوي حاجات غير أخلاقية. So you should always try to give your employees the opportunity and afford them the opportunity of being able to do some mistakes. Some mistakes are fixable. You can fix them with minimal cost. But when it comes to unethical behaviors, these are things that are very difficult to address. Now moving on to an important idea, a new term, if you may, and that is whistleblowers. So who are whistleblowers? These are people, these are individuals, persons who raise ethical concerns or issues to others. So if an organization is doing something that is bad, that is negatively affecting society, for example, and they are keeping, of course, this thing as a secret. They don't want it to go out. They don't want the media to know about it. And then one person from this organization goes to a newspaper or goes or writes something in Twitter or Facebook that basically exposes what this organization is doing. Now this person is called a whistleblower. So they blowed the whistle on the bad practices of this organization. هذول الأشخاص اللي يفضحون الممارسات غير الأخلاقية اللي ترتكبها بعض الشركات. شركة مثلا كانت تلوث مياه الشرب برمي المخلفات السامة حقت مصانعها فيها، وكانوا كل شيء يسوونه بشكل سري، ما يبغون طبعا الناس يعرفون. ليش هم يسوون الشيء هذا أصلا؟ لأنه كذا أقل تكلفة عليهم من أنهم يجيبون شركة متخصصة تعالج النفايات السامة قبل ما يتخلصون منها. فقالوا إيش، خلينا بس نرميها ونتخلص منها وما عندنا مشكلة في الناس، خليهم يمرضون، خليهم يصير فيهم اللي يصير. فأحد الموظفين كتب تغريدة على تويتر وحط صور إنه هذا اللي قاعد، هذه الشركة تسوي كذا وكذا وكذا. فنسمي الشخص هذا اللي فضح هذه الممارسات غير الأخلاقية نسميه whistle blower. Okay, he is a whistleblower. So من فين جات كلمة whistleblower? What's a whistle؟ اللي هي الصفارة زي اللي استخدموها حكام كرة القدم. So basically what this means is that they drew attention of others to this matter. نبهوا الناس الآخرين باستخدام هذه الصافرة المتخيلة على هذه الممارسات غير الأخلاقية. So they blew the whistle on this organization. So now we know who these people are. So what is the issue here? The issue is that we need to protect them. We need to protect them because they are definitely going to be targeted by these organizations. When someone blows the whistle on such negative and unethical practices of organizations, these unethical organizations are going to go after them. They would want to sue them. They are going to fire them. They are going to deny them some of their rights. They are maybe going to falsify evidence against them. So we must provide protection to them. في الفترة القريبة مثلا هيئة مكافحة الفساد النزاهة قالت إنه الأشخاص اللي يبلغون على فساد الجهات الحكومية راح يتم توفير الحماية لهم. So this is exactly what we are talking about. Okay? لكن of course you have to behave within the law. You have to expose these practices according to the laws and regulations. يعني مثلا من الجرائم عندنا انه ما يصير يعني تنشر معلومات خاصة على السوشيال ميديا، معلومات خاصة بأشخاص آخرين أو بشركات معينة. فالخطأ اللي يقع فيه كثير من الناس انه هو يجي يبغى يفضح بعض الممارسات غير الجيدة اللي تحصل في جهة حكومية أو في غيره، يقوم يحط تغريدة عامة ويخلي الناس تشوفها ويخلي الناس يعني تتفاعل معاها وتصير مشاكل كثيرة جدا. هذا الشخص هو اللي حيتعرض للمساءلة. الخطوة الصحيحة اللي كان المفروض انها تتخذ انه هذا الشخص ياخذ هذه الأدلة اللي عنده ويتجه لهيئة مكافحة الفساد أو للجهات الحكومية زي النيابة العامة زي ديوان المظالم أو غيره، ويقدم شكوى رسمية من غير ما يشارك أو يفضح يعني وثائق سرية أو بيانات خاصة ويظهرها للعلن، أنها ممكن تستعمل بطريقة غير جيدة من قبل أشخاص غير جيدين. ف protection must be provided, yes, but you have to be careful when it comes to how you expose these unethical practices or these unethical organizations.
Many of you are going to study a course in the future called entrepreneurship. So part of entrepreneurship is social entrepreneurship. So a business entrepreneur is someone who has come up with a great idea. He or she was the first one to come up with such creativity in order to see a need and address it. But a social entrepreneur is an individual or an organization that seeks out opportunities to improve society. How do they do that? By using practical, innovative, and sustainable approaches. So let's consider a couple of examples. Microsoft, for example, has decided that it's going to donate a lot of its profits or part of its profits for a good cause. So from our sales of Microsoft Windows, for example, we are going to donate $1 million to research universities and to charity organizations. Another approach is not just simply donating money, but trying to solve problems of society. We have a lot of poor people who do not have access to medical care. They cannot go to the doctor, they cannot go to the hospital simply because they don't have enough money to cover the cost. So what some companies are doing is that they are trying to come up with solutions to this problem. They are trying to come up with ways to reduce the cost of medical attention so that such groups of people can have access to this kind of care. So a social entrepreneur is someone, and this someone can be an individual or it can be an entire organization that works to see and find and locate opportunities in order to help society, and in a sustainable way, in a practical way, in a creative way, so that they help society become better, so that they can help individuals be more comfortable when it comes to dealing with the hassles of life. And since we are still on the topic of promoting helping society, we have a number of different approaches that organizations can use in order to be more involved in helping and in bringing about positive societal change. So one concept is called corporate philanthropy. So who is a philanthropist? This is someone who is being good towards society, someone who donates money, who donates other things to help those who are less fortunate. So corporate philanthropy can be an effective way for companies to address societal problems. This is when companies donate profits, when companies donate, some of their products, for example, to help a good societal cause. So you have probably heard about a lot of good campaigns when it comes to organizations helping out society, like the Pink campaign that promotes awareness of breast cancer, and that in which organizations are, for example, donating their month's profits or parts of this month's profit to help those who are suffering from breast cancer, or they donate to hospitals who take care of such patients, or they donate to medical facilities that conduct research to help find a cure for breast cancer. So this is when organizations are contributing to helping out society in its causes. Another type of approach is what is called employee volunteering. And this is sponsored by the organization itself. So you can, as an employee, as a human being, as in your private life, you can just, during off work hours, you can go and volunteer to help those who are less fortunate. But in here we are talking about company sponsored programs in which you are given time off to go volunteer. Some organizations even now in the kingdom are doing this, where you can take some time off, to go get married. You have your own annual leave and vacation. But some companies nowadays are introducing some vacation times for volunteering, or they would select a group of employees each and every year to go somewhere during work days to volunteer to help clean beaches, to help build houses for the less fortunate, to help collect even donations for those who need them. So the companies can do a lot when it comes to helping out society. And again, some people might argue against it because they would say this is costly for the organization, this goes beyond our business purposes. And a lot of people are going with it because this is what the society wants, and this is what our stakeholders are demanding from us. So the point here is being creative when it comes to how you can help society as an organization. You can either simply donate money, or donate some of your products, or you can donate your time, your employees' time. So you are paying your employees' salary from 7 o'clock in the morning to 4 o'clock in the evening. So you can use some of those work hours to help the local communities, and to try to contribute to solving out some of the problems that exist in society. Managers should lead by example. We said before that actions speak louder than words. So just because you signed a code of ethics as an employee, but when you see your manager lie, cheat, come to work late, steal from the company, what kind of message is this manager sending? Not only to you, but also to other stakeholders, to customers, to suppliers, to the society, to the community. So ethical leadership should be something that the organization emphasizes. They need to train managers and leaders that you are role models, and what you do is going to be reflected one way or another in the behaviors of your subordinates, in the behaviors of the people who work under your supervision. So leadership is has a lot of implications, and part of those implications have to do with ethics. So leaders and managers need to be aware that what they do is being observed all the time, and it could send the wrong message. So they need to encourage themselves and be encouraged to behave ethically, as their behavior is going to be modeled by others.
And the last thing on this chapter is just some guidelines of how to become an ethical leader. So we have talked about ethical leadership before. We have mentioned how important it is for leaders to behave ethically and act as role models themselves in order to encourage all other employees within the organization to follow them, follow their lead, and act and behave ethically as well. So you have to start with yourself, begin with yourself, ابدأ بنفسك, and become ethical yourself, and then others should be more encouraged to follow. You should have open lines of communication with your employees. Stress the importance of behaving in an ethical way and always following principles and values of the organization, and use a reward system to hold everyone accountable to the values. So try to reward ethical behavior and try to design um, the way you reward your employees in a way that doesn't really encourage um, unethical behaviors, like what we have seen before. لا تخلي مثلا نظام التقييم السنوي يعتمد فقط على مثلا كم عميل جديد تجيب لي. ممكن كم عميل حافظت عليه، كم عميل قدم تعليقات إيجابية حولك, and so on. So these are just, tips, guidelines of how to become an ethical leader. So this concludes our chapter. Thank you very much, and I'll see you on the next one.